Hey everyone, first off I just want to say welcome back. Thanks for those that have been listening to me regularly. I really appreciate you listening to my podcast. For those of you that are joining us for the first time, welcome. I do encourage you, if this is the first podcast you're listening to try go listen to my very first podcast, or at least the first few, because it gives you a little bit of an understanding of who I am and what I'm trying to do and achieve with this podcast, and why you should even consider listening to the content that I'm putting out there. So try go to the first one and listen from the beginning. Otherwise, really awesome to have you join us, and I hope you enjoy the podcast that I'm going to be sharing today. So first off, I just got to say to everybody, I know I missed my podcast last week. I really try my best to get out a podcast every Thursday. But last week I wasn't able to get my podcast out, and that's kind of what I'm going to talk about a little bit today and explain why. So first, I apologize for that, but I just wanted to explain why. So the past week and a half, my life has been turned a little bit upside down. My wife and I, we've really had a rough week and a half, and the reason we've had a rough week is my daughter got very ill. Probably about 2 weeks back, she got an ear infection. Now look, she's 5 years old, going to kindy. I promise you, the kindy, no, I lie, she's not a kindy anymore. She's actually started in primary school now. She's in level 1 or year 1. But either way, kindy, year 1, when they're small, they go to school. It's like a cesspool of bugs. So if you've got kids, I promise you it's the norm for them to bring those bugs home. They get ill and then they share it with the rest of the family. So it wasn't out of the ordinary for her to have picked something else up. And it did start off with earache. So she, even at the school, the teacher contacted us and said to us, hey, your daughter's not herself. She's usually quite a bubbly, full of energy, easygoing type. She's actually full of energy and really awesome. But when she's miserable or feeling a bit sore, she gets quite miserable, and she's just, as all of us, she's not the most fun person to be around. And the teacher picked up that she wasn't her normal self, so we just had to keep an eye on it. That night when she came home, she started complaining about her ear being sore. So you start normal, you start with paracetamol. When paracetamol's not working, or if they start getting a bit of a fever, then you could consider ibuprofen, your normal meds that you give to your kids to try and get all of that under control. So we started that knowing it was ear infection. Here in New Zealand, I have shared it on a lot of my other podcasts. It is a challenge to get a GP appointment quickly. Usually it takes, they're very busy, so to get an appointment quickly can take a day, 2, sometimes even as much as a week to get that appointment. So you either got to go sit in emergency, which could be for hours to be able to see somebody, depending on the triage and the priority of the cases that are sitting in emergency at that particular time. Or you got to wait till you can actually get your appointment with your GP. Or what we've learned as well is there is the facility where you can go and make an online appointment with a doctor, and you can do an online consult. So that online consult you can get quite quickly. You can usually get them within the same day or the very next day. So because she wasn't well, we thought, okay, this is not out of the ordinary as per se, but let's consult with the doctor. We did the online consultation, spoke with the doctor. He said, yep, seems like an ear infection. And with what's going on and all the symptoms, we'll prescribe an antibiotic, and she should be okay in a couple of days, but just see through the antibiotic. So we started on the antibiotic. That was probably, I think that was on about the Wednesday. It was about midweek when the teacher had picked it up, and then we got the consult and we started administering I think it was the Thursday, maybe even the Wednesday night. We might have picked up the script from the pharmacy and got the antibiotic and started the antibiotic. What we did notice after the antibiotic is she got a bit of diarrhea, which isn't abnormal, because we also know our kids, when they've gone on antibiotics before, they have got a runny stomach before, or diarrhea. So this wasn't totally out of character for what was happening. But what we did start noticing by the Thursday is not only was she still suffering with the earache and it was extremely sore, she now had this runny stomach, but it was a different type of diarrhea. This was like, and I know it's awful talking about poop, but hey, if you're a parent, you talk about these things. But it started looking like, best way to explain it was like jam, like tar, like really jammy, a sticky mess, and dark in color, like really dark in color. And that's what got us a little worried. We were like, this is not normal. We've had diarrhea before when our kids have been sick or had antibiotics or whatever else, but this wasn't normal. This wasn't the norm. Not only that did we start noticing, but we also started noticing she was extremely pale, and that wasn't normal color for her. So this got us a little bit worried, and we thought it might be the antibiotics, but we weren't sure. That was by I think we noticed by late the Thursday, because you had to give a certain amount of doses of the antibiotics and then it kicked in. By the Friday, we were really getting a little worried and thought, no, there's something not right here. I think we need to consult with the doctors again. Again, trying to get an appointment. We could only get one for the following Tuesday. We booked the appointment anyway with the GP, just in case, because we didn't know if we'd be able to clear it up by then. So let's just get the booking in. But we started getting a little worried. Anyway, long story short, what we realized is, no, we need to head off to emergency. So on the Saturday morning, we decided to take her through to the emergency. Now, where we stay, we're about an hour north of CBD Auckland, where we stay in New Zealand. And there are emergencies near us, so you could go to those emergencies. But what we opted to do, and on good advice from a lot of friends here, is they said if your child is really not well, don't waste your time with trying to go to an emergency locally. Rather, if you're in the Auckland area, drive the extra distance if you can and go to CBD and go to the hospital there. They refer to the children's hospital as Starship. It is where all the specialists would be, everything that you would need, all in one place, specializing with children. So just do the extra trip and go into CBD and go to Starship. So that's what we did on Saturday morning. And we drove all the way in and we waited, waiting room, again, triage. She wasn't unstable or anything like that. So obviously anybody that was coming in that had broken arms or kids with bleeding faces and all that would be a priority, and they'd move forward. So it did take a little while to be able to eventually see a doctor. That said, the nurse, as we arrived, did take down your details, and they went through all the triage questions and asked, okay, what are the symptoms, what's going on, how is she feeling at the moment, taking her vitals, temperature, heart rate, all the rest of it. And they said, okay, cool, they'll put you in the queue and you'll get your chance to see the doctor. It did take a little while to eventually see the doctor. The doctor went through everything again. My wife, being as thorough as she is, she took a lot of photos of the poop so that we not only were explaining what it looked like, but we could show the doctor a visual of, hey, this is what it looked like, this was the first one, the second one, whatever else, this is the medications, i.e. the antibiotics we've been giving her, the paracetamol, ibuprofen, everything that we've been giving her. So you go through all of that with the doctor has a good feel, look, checks everything with her and said, okay, we're probably going to need to do a bit of a blood test. So it'll be a finger prick just to try and check and eliminate any potential viruses that it could be. So we'll do a little bit of further test, but from what it seems like, the doctor was saying it could be probably just a reaction to the antibiotics that she was on, but they weren't 100% sure, or it could be a further viral infection, but they were trying to do a process of elimination. So at that stage, we still weren't too worried, but we're sitting at the hospital waiting for further tests to take place, i.e. the blood test. They went and did the finger prick. Oh my goodness, my daughter does not like needles, so she did not like us after doing the finger prick. But they got the blood out, whatever else. They sent that off for tests. Then you have to wait a little while for those tests to come back, for the doctor to be able to see again. This was all on Saturday morning. I think we were eventually getting into the late afternoon, so it must have been closer to now. We've been there since, I don't know what time in the morning, but it's getting closer to 3 in the afternoon. So just to give you an idea, it's hours that you can wait to actually see someone. So it's not a quick process in triage, okay? But you've got to understand there's a lot of people that they're seeing. It is a busy hospital, and obviously they have to triage, and the ones that are most critical will jump the queue and go in first, okay? So if your child is stable and not in a condition that is critical, you are going to wait a lot longer, but you're at least in the right place with all the right doctors for them to do everything. So try exercise the patients and understand where they're coming from. I say this because I know by 3 o'clock I was getting antsy and already turning around to my wife and saying, if it was that critical and that urgent, surely they would have called us by now. So maybe we go to the reception, we tell the doctors, hey, she seems okay, we've got the antibiotics, you've looked at her, you're not saying there's anything wrong, do we go home and the doctor phones us if there's anything major and then we come back type thing. As I was saying that, the nurse came back to us and the doctor and said, come, we need to talk to you, took us into the back room. I say the back room, but it's like one of the off towards the back where the rooms were for the doctors, so she could sit down and talk to us. And she explained to us they were a little concerned. They haven't picked up any viruses or anything like that, but looking at her stool sample, it's very dark in color and it's very jammy, and that is a concern to them. because that showed that there was obviously blood in her stool and there's bleeding internally, and generally when it's dark in color, it's bleeding that's happening somewhere in the upper part of the digestive system. So we're talking like stomach, small intestine, something like that is where there's bleeding. So what they said they're going to unfortunately need to do is they're going to need to book us in overnight, because they need to do further tests to try pinpoint and find out where this bleeding is coming from and what is the actual cause of the bleeding. Was it just the antibiotics that caused it? And if so, where is it? And or is it a viral infection? Or is it a bacterial infection? What is the actual cause of this internal bleeding? So this was already gone from, oh gee, we had an ear infection, we're coming in here for an ear infection, took antibiotics, and now we're worried about an internal bleed and we're getting booked into hospital. Okay, so that's Saturday night. We got booked into the hospital and they said that they would start with a x-ray. So the first thing that we had to do was take my daughter down for an x-ray. That x-ray, that's pretty straightforward and easy for a child to do the x-ray. I think what was probably a little bit more difficult was doing all the finger pricks and then eventually having to try put an IV line in. Needles, little children, traumatic, very difficult. That said, the nurses and the doctors were really good. They not only were there so many of them to try and help, they did even try help with play therapists that would try to distract the child while you're trying to do and administer and put in IVs and whatever else. So they really do try their best, but my daughter definitely doesn't like needles, so it was really a tough one. Anyway, getting back to my story on my timeline, so we went for the x-rays. We were booked in on that Saturday. The Sunday morning, we were still in there. They had got some of the blood tests back, which eliminated that it wasn't a viral infection. So they were still trying to figure out, well, what is potentially the cause of the internal bleeding that she had. The x-rays came back and showed that there was nothing that they could see as per the x-ray of her abdomen. So they told us what they would now need to do is they need to schedule her for another scan, which with the doctors that we were consulting, they said could potentially lead towards an internal bleed in children. That's called a Meckel bleed. So they wanted to do a Meckel test, which is another scan, but specifically trying to find this Meckel, which in essence is in the digestive tract. I think in the small intestine there's like a deviation, and they explained that this deviation is something that happens it's rare, it doesn't happen often, especially if there's symptoms from the actual deviation in the small intestine. It's really extremely rare, but this potentially could be what the cause of the bleed is. So they want to try to do the scan to try to see if that would happen, but the scan couldn't happen on a Sunday. It would only be able to happen on the Monday when everybody was back, full staff complement, whatever else. So we're like, okay, and obviously she's not critical because she's stable, although now we could start seeing in the bloods that her hemoglobin levels were low. So I think they were dropping, so they were getting into the low 90s on the weekend, and by the Monday morning they were already in the mid 80s and they were dropping. So there was definitely a bleed and she was definitely losing blood, which is what was getting them concerned. Hence we were booked into the hospital, and hence they were trying to do the test as a process of elimination to try to work out where this bleed was coming from. So the x-rays had come back negative and they weren't showing anything. The viruses had come back negative, so we were worried, although my daughter still seemed okay besides the earache. That was the biggest problem that she was really having, was the earache was still a major, although she looked pale and she still had the diarrhea and it still was dark in color and everything like that. So we were in the hospital, my wife stayed in hospital with her. I can tell you in Starship, in the children's hospital, they give you a room for my daughter and there's a bed there for my wife, so my wife could actually stay with her. And then what I was ending up doing is, because I've also got my son, is I would travel home, look after him, get him all sorted out, travel back to the hospital every single day, get them what they needed, then travel back and forth and back and forth. So that started obviously on the Sunday, and then again on the Monday. I did speak to work. Extremely accommodating. They were unbelievable. They, to the point where actually my managers turned around and said, Brett, because I was trying to juggle, I was trying to also work and take my laptop into the hospital. So I was trying to work in between, working after hours, trying to juggle it all. They eventually said to me, Brett, family first. You just leave it. Work will be here. We'll look after it. Why I'm sharing this is it just shows you the culture here about family and putting family first. And maybe I'm blessed that I found a company that's like that, but my wife's company was exactly the same. So in our opinion and our experiences, is showing us that the Kiwi culture, where they talk about putting family first, they live it. And they were really pushing both of us just to take time off and go focus on your family. And there's even a type of leave that you can put in that comes off your sick leave for looking after your children. So seriously, they supported me like you will not believe, and they supported my wife doing the exact same thing. So I just wanted to share this so that it highlights to you that is one of the things we've found about being here in New Zealand that is an absolute positive, over and above so many other things that I'm going to share in this story that I'm sharing today. So getting back to the story and the timeline is now we're sitting on obviously the weekend. My wife spent it in hospital with my daughter. We've done some of the tests already, x-rays, blood tests, but it's not finding anything conclusive yet. So the Monday morning, I was back at the hospital after sorting out my son and everything like that with my wife. We went for that Meckel scan. The Meckel scan, again, not much to the scan. It's kind of like a CT scan where she just had to lay there, lay still. It just takes time. I mean, it must have been half an hour, 45 minutes of them scanning all around her abdomen, trying to look for this Meckel. And then taking her back up to her room and waiting for the results of that scan. I think the hardest part is doing the blood tests every so often. So they were constantly pricking her fingers to try and get blood out, to try and test and see where her hemoglobin levels were, and they were dropping. So I understand why they had to do the test, but my daughter did not like those tests at all. And it's heartbreaking when you have to watch your daughter going through something and forcing her to go through something when actually, besides her earache, she felt okay according to her. So we're putting her through pain to try and help her, and you try to explain that to a 5-year-old, why they have to go through pain to get better. It just doesn't comprehend in their mind. So it was really a challenging time for us. Not to mention what was also very difficult is we had to get an IV line up. My daughter had a total panic attack, like breakdown in trying to get an IV up. She just totally refused, to the point where we eventually had to get the doctors to give her a bit of a sedative just to calm her down. And I had to physically, even on the sedative where she was a bit loopy and whatever, still had to physically hold her, sit with the doctors and everything, putting up the IV line. So extremely traumatic trying to get that done. But you understand it's for the good of your child, so you do it, but it's still very hard. I mean, my wife just couldn't. She had to walk out the room in tears, seeing how we're forcing her and she's screaming, just let me go, don't do this. It's traumatic. And I'm not trying to share this to get you all, feeling sorry for me or anything like that. I'm just trying to explain the situation that we're going through, but more to explain how the nurses and the doctors and the play therapists, they were all there with us. I must have had about 9 people in the room with me, helping me, trying to help my daughter, blowing bubbles and trying to distract her and whatever else. So they were phenomenal in trying to help us, even although it was as traumatic as it was. So that was on the Monday when we were trying to get the Meckel scan. They said post the Meckel scan results, which we got back, I think it was late on the Monday night, they came back and said, okay, well, x-rays are negative, Meckel scan is also not found anything. They're not finding anything in the bloods yet that can point to anything. So what they're going to try now on the Tuesday is they were going to try an ultrasound. So Tuesday morning, again, still going through her staying in the hospital with my wife, going through constant monitoring and testing even throughout the night. So now my wife's getting very little sleep. My daughter's not getting the best sleep either, because they have to wake her up every so many hours to check all her vitals and whatever else, as they do in the hospital. So it's all normal, just showing that you're getting sleep deprived now as well. I was also driving back and forth between CBD, which we're about an hour north, so back and forth to look after my son and everything, and going back into the hospital every day, taking in what they need. So Tuesday we were booked in for the ultrasound, got the ultrasound done on the Tuesday. Again, more finger pricks, constantly checking the blood, which my daughter was hating. That said, after about the 4th one, she started getting very brave, so really proud of her. But we started learning what to do and how to distract her and what worked for her and what didn't. So not something you ever want to have to learn with your child, but we learned how to get the finger pricks done in a less traumatic way. Still not something that she enjoyed. But anyway, got the ultrasounds done on the Tuesday. Those results unfortunately also came back as negative. They couldn't find anything on the ultrasound. This is where we were starting to get a little worried, because now we had a team of doctors. We didn't only have surgical doctors assigned now, because they were thinking potentially there may be surgery that they'd have to do to really find what the cause of this internal bleed was. They had me and medical terms, but there's a gastroenterologist or whatever. It's a doctor that specializes in the digestive system, so everything to do with the small intestine, the large intestine, the internal digestive system. Okay, so we had that doctor that was assigned, as well as a number of other specialists, and they were all consulting and trying to work out what was wrong. And they were very good in the way that they constantly collaborated, and they were constantly trying to do a process of elimination, but they were also trying to follow a process where we would stick to whatever was least invasive to my daughter and cause her, the last resort was to have to do any type of surgery, which scared the hell out of us. So that's really what we were trying to avoid. So we were really hoping some of these tests would pick something up. By the Tuesday night and / the Wednesday morning, when they were talking to us and saying, okay, well, they've done the medical test, it's negative. They've done the x-rays, they've come back negative. They've done ultrasound, it's come back negative and not finding anything. They've done a blood test to check for viruses, bacteria, whatever, it's come back negative. And there's still obviously a bleed because her hemoglobin levels were still dropping. So they weren't in the 70s yet, which would have been dangerous, like really considered dangerous, but they were in the 80s, so you could see her heart rate was elevated because it was working a lot harder to get the lesser blood around her system, to get oxygen around her system. So we knew that we had to find that bleed. We had to figure out where she was bleeding to be able to stop it. And so it's very stressful being in the hospital when you know your little 5-year-old, there's something wrong, but even the doctors can't pinpoint what the cause is. And without knowing what the cause is, you can't fix it. And it's stressful as hell. It really is. So what they told us on the Wednesday, the plan would be, is the next step would be to book her in to put her under general anesthetic, where they would do a scope. So they would do an endoscope and a gastroscope. So they're going to put a scope from the top and a scope from the bottom to try have a look and see if they could see where potential internal bleeding was happening. The only issues with the scope from both ends is the scope from the top would be able to take the hole right the way down through the stomach into the small intestine, but it could only go so far. The small intestine is meters and meters long, and they wouldn't be able to go through the whole small intestine. So if it was further down into the small intestine, they weren't going to be able to pick that up with the scope. Going from the bottom end, it'll go through all the large intestine all the way to the end of the small intestine where it joins to the large intestine, but wouldn't be able to see the whole small intestine. So if the scopes didn't pick up anything, the next step after the scope would they'd have to do keyhole surgery. So that's where they would put a camera in from making an incision above her belly button, and then they would have to physically use a camera on the outside of the small intestine, so it's inside of her abdomen, but on checking from the outside of the small intestine to see if they could see anything wrong, and almost trying to work their way along the small intestine. And what they would have to do is if they found the problem on the small intestine, they would then have to make a further incision on her abdomen from her belly button, or depending on where they found the problem on the small intestine, to pull out her intestine for where the problem is, and they would have to cut that piece out and then rejoin her intestine. So as a parent trying to hear this about your 5-year-old that was healthy just a few days ago, to where she had an ear infection, to where we are at the stages now where they're considering doing surgery on your child and taking her insides out and doing major surgery. This was one of the scariest things I've had to go through. And I promise you, it's one thing when stuff is happening to you. I mean, I've had cancer in my life and whatever, and my own surgeries and whatever, but it's so different when it's your child. And there are so many thoughts that are going through your head, and all you want is the best for them, but you're also so scared at the same time. You're like so scared to make the wrong decision, and you really want to just advocate for them but make the right decisions, but sometimes it's so hard to know what those right decisions are. To the point where when the doctors had spoken my wife and I through all of this on the Wednesday and said they're going to book her in for the Thursday, typical of my wife and I, we did a whole lot of research, and I know people say don't consult Google, okay, but we consulted Google. I'm in IT as well. I could not help myself. I promise you, you can't sleep. So all you're doing is, between consulting ChatGPT, Google, whatever, you're trying to do as much homework as possible to try and get an understanding of what was going on inside my daughter. And with all the feedback that you got from all these doctors, you just want to see, is there anything else? And this is where you start seeing stuff about, oh, well, there was this capsule camera that they could use that could go all the way through her digestive system, and there's a CT scan that they could do, and you want to exhaust every single non-invasive surgery option before you you cut my little girl open. That's kind of like what you were trying to push. To the point where after doing this research, I said to my wife, right, we're meeting with this doctor on Thursday morning, and this was my wife and I talking till who knows what time in the morning on Wednesday morning, trying to go through everything that we're finding online. So I said, I'm going to be there early on Thursday morning. We're going to talk to this doctor, and no ways. They've got to push, they've got to find this without having to cut it open. So I left early on the Thursday morning because they scheduled her for this procedure, meaning the scope, as well as potentially if they can't find anything of scope, then doing this keyhole surgery and potentially the surgery to actually mend her intestine. And we hadn't signed the what do you call it? Not the non-disclosure. What's the word I'm looking for? See, my mind. But we didn't give permission, my wife and I, to the surgery yet. We hadn't agreed to it yet because we were still got so many questions going through our mind. And the doctors were good. They understood where we were coming from and said, "Well, give it the night, think on it, and we'll talk first thing in the morning." So I did meet with the doctors, specifically the surgical doctors, first thing in the morning. I take a step back. I know I met with them on the Thursday morning, but it was also on the Wednesday when I was still at the hospital. Before we had even done this research, and that night, one of the doctors did come up because we said we wanted to talk to the doctors because we had more questions and we weren't happy to sign. And it was because in prep for the surgery on the Thursday, on the Wednesday, the anaesthetist came to meet with us, and he was talking through his plan of pain management, etc. And he started then talking to how they'd potentially, if they went as far as to cut her open, where he was talking about epidurals and whatever else for pain relief. And that, I think, is that was like the penny dropped for my wife and I. What? We're going that far on my little 5-year-old? And that's when we were like, no ways. We need to see further doctors. We have more questions. We're not signing this. We're not okay with this. But it's so hard to say that because at the same time, you don't want to make the wrong decision that threatens her life. But at the same time, you're like, how can it be that she's gone from a few days ago okay, and even looking at her now, besides her earache and paleness, that it's this urgent that they have to go to that degree to do this type of surgery. It was just like so hard to accept. So we explained to him, no, as great as he was, and he really was good, we need to speak to the surgical team, another doctor. They sent one of the surgical team, but she was one of the younger doctors, and I don't mean it in a disrespectful way, but she sat in front of me and was trying to explain this to me, and I'm asking my questions, but she couldn't answer some of my questions because, I can be full of shit. I know it, okay? And I really was. As a parent, I was also lack of sleep, whatever. It's my daughter. I even started getting a little bit full of nonsense where I turned around and said, I sent my car in to a mechanic. I probably asked the mechanic more questions than I'm asking you, and I'm trying to entrust my daughter, never mind my car, with you, okay? And then I would start, and I saw she was young, and I knew I was just being full of nonsense. I turned around and said, well, do you have a child? And I knew the answer was probably going to be no, and it was. So I said, well, then you can't understand where we're coming from. And she tried to relate to, I was actually being so full of nonsense, and I know that now, but I was really trying to, it's like you're angry, so you're trying to push for answers. Anyway, why I was telling you that is she had to go away and had to call one of the more senior doctors to talk to us, and that's why on the Thursday morning I said, okay, before my wife and I will meet with the more senior surgeons and chat to them and see what this was all about. That was on the Thursday morning. I got him, and I really started going for this doctor and turning around saying, no, you haven't tried all the non-surgical, you haven't tried everything to the nth. What about this capsule that we've read, capsule scope, that she could swallow and go through? And they said, oh, you can't, she's 5 years old, too small. I said, rubbish. I read up online, a 2 to a 3-year-old can. She started explaining to me how it potentially won't be able to pick up what we're looking for. At that stage, we thought it was a Meckel that we were looking for, and it wouldn't be able to pick it up. And I do know, even reading on Google, it said for a Meckel, it's probably not going to be able to pick it up, but it is something you could insist on and try do further non-invasive scans from the capsule. It also said you could try a proper CT scan, and I was pushing, but then what about a CT scan? You suddenly become this expert and challenging the expert, But really trying to do it, understand you're coming from a place of worry, you're coming from a place of trying to do right by your child. So it's really hard. And I was pushing her on the CT scan, and she was explaining to me, oh yeah, but in her size and what's going on and the way the CT scan works, it's not going to be Anyway, the long story short is you were really challenging her on everything, but she was brilliant. She didn't dismiss me, she didn't talk down to me, she was assertive, which is what I needed. She came across as, you know, she knows what she's talking about, to the point I was even asking her, you know, how experienced she is and how many of these surgeries has she done. And I've read up that MECL is so rare. Have you even done a MECL experience in dealing with a MECL before? So this is kind of, I was really going hard for her, okay? Which I know probably was quite disrespectful, but it was really coming from a place of worry for my daughter. She handled it brilliantly. She calmed us down. She said, I asked her, okay, fine, talk through the whole procedure from beginning to end. Tell me about your process of elimination. Explain to me why we have to go to this point. And she spoke through it step by step. Even although I probably asked her to repeat herself, I don't know how many times, but I needed peace of mind, and I needed to know that, okay, we've done everything we can, we've got to go through with this. To the point where even after that discussion in the morning, she said, tell you what, don't sign this now. We've gone through all the steps, we've gone through all the whys. She's reassured us this is what she would do for her child. She's explained all the risks and everything of whether we do it or we don't do it, and even told us it's still our choice. If we only want to go up to the point of the non-invasive and we don't want to do the surgery and we want to wait and see if it happens again and then come back, fine, it's still our choice. It's not her recommendations though, but she explained why with all the pros, cons, risks, everything. She was really good, and she even didn't force us to sign anything then. She said to us, think we're booked for the surgery later this morning, rather come downstairs and then you tell us how far we need to or are allowed to go. One of the hardest decisions I've ever had to make in my life, okay? Not only you sleep deprived, you're emotionally at your wit's end. My wife was emotionally at her wit's end, and here we've got this little life that is, she's so perfect. And here we got to make this decision where we're giving people we've just met the permission to, if they have to go all the way to the position of cutting my daughter open and pulling her insides out of her body to try help her. I mean, it's freaking me out. Anyway, we got to the point where we went down, booking her into the surgery, going downstairs, and we got to speak to the anaesthetist and the gastrologists or whatever they're called, and the other surgical doctors and all the rest of it. And we said, okay, we're gonna sign over, we're gonna give the permission for you to not only do the scopes, not only do the keyhole surgery, but if you have to go to the point of even cutting her open, pulling out her intestine, fix her, find the bleed, and let's get her sorted. So that is the right decision by her. Now, I promise you, signing that form and giving permission for that, it took everything in me. I've never felt so worried in all my life in a decision that I've made. Generally, I know what I want, I know what decision I'm going to make, and I just go for it and I stick by. And I knew this was the right thing, but I was still as scared as shit. I promise you, I was so worried. And that's on the Thursday morning. I think it was actually past morning now, because now we had been delaying by talking with all the doctors. So we were close to midday, somewhere around there, midday, 1 o'clock. That they said, okay, what have you agreed to? And we said, we've agreed to it all, we've signed it all off. That's when the anaesthetist gave us something to calm her down, put her to started putting her to sleep, whatever else. All the other nurses, doctors were coming by, and they were going to wheel her off. As my wife was going into the surgical rooms with her, because only one parent could go in, I got to sit down in the waiting room and just sit. I promise you, I bawled my eyes out. I was trying to stay strong in front of them, but it was so hard trying to tell these doctors that you've got my daughter's life in your hands. Please look after my baby girl. Just look after her. It was hard. It was so hard. And then, God forbid, if anything went wrong, I swear, I don't know if I'd ever be able to forgive myself. So it was one of the hardest decisions, and I'm sure so many parents have had to go through that. I pray no parent ever has to go through anything surgical with any of their kids, especially when they're so small. It's awful. But anyway, they wheeled her off. I was in literally a puddle, crying in the corner, thought, just let it out, who gives a crap. Just cry, get it out, and wait for your wife to come out. So I waited for my wife to come out and join me, and that's when they explained to us, okay, you can go to the waiting room, go get something to eat, walk around, whatever, because they did explain her surgery could, depending on how far it had to go, could be as long as a little bit more than 3 hours long. So we knew it's probably going to be the longest 3 hours of our lives, waiting for or where we got to, did we even find this? And what was scaring me even more is if we've signed all this off, they've done all of this, they cut it open, they look, and then they still can't find the bleed, which scared me even more. So I don't know which I wanted, well, actually I do. I know what I wanted. I wanted them to go in with the scopes, find the bleed, and didn't have to do anything invasive surgery-wise. That's really what I wanted. But because of everything that was going on, I'd almost resigned to the fact that I don't think they're going to find that. I think they're going to go all the way to where they're going to do keyhole surgery, and they're going to have to cut my daughter open. And we're trying to mentally prepare for that and the recovery and everything afterwards, and that's where we were trying to get ourselves to. So while she was in surgery, my wife and I said, okay, we've got 3 hours, so let's just try walk around. We hadn't eaten since, I don't know, probably more than 24 hours now, because when they started prepping for the surgery, she couldn't eat, and because it's a endoscope and a gastroscope, they give her stuff to clear out the digestive system, so she wasn't able to eat. And when she wasn't able, you can't eat in front of her, so we didn't eat in front of her, and actually you didn't even feel like eating, so we hadn't eaten in a while, and we thought, okay, let's just go get some food. So we walked off, and me also having celiac disease, to try find somewhere where you could even buy food was a mission, but who cared? We're just trying to walk off to try get something to eat. We bought some, I think it was sushi or something that we found that was gluten-free or whatever. So we bought the sushi, and we were going to sit in an area where we could eat. And that's when my wife's phone rang, and I promise your heart probably sinks and falls to its feet. You think, Jesus, it's only been an hour. Why the hell are they phoning us? What the hell's wrong? Okay, and all these thoughts are going through her head, and I just saw my wife start crying, and she's on the phone because they gave her number. Anyway, what it turned out is the surgeon had walked out of the surgery to phone us to let us know, as they put in the scope, they found the bleed in her stomach. I cannot tell you what a sense of relief that was, because what that meant is they've now found the bleed. We know what the cause is. So this tar-like poops that she was getting that was full of blood, it's actually called a melena. Okay, it's called melena. That's what my daughter had. And it also meant that because they found this bleed in her stomach, it's not a MECL, so it's not a deviation of her small intestine, which didn't need the surgery or anything like that. It actually turned out that it was an ulcer in her stomach that was the bleed. So they're able to stop the bleed so that the bleeding would stop, and then her hemoglobin would stop dropping. They were able to just check from the scopes from the top end and the bottom end that this was the only bleed, and that the whole surgical team and everything was confident this is what the cause was, or the actual root causes. We had to see what caused the actual ulcer and what caused the bleed in the beginning. That turns out it's a combination of from the ear infection and all the viruses that she's been having. She's been having flus and everything over the last few weeks, bringing her back from school, and then us giving ibuprofen and the antibiotic that she went on, and potentially a bacteria that when the lining of the stomach gets broken down because of all the medications and the viruses and everything that she's had. Anyway, long story short, it was an amalgamation of a whole lot of things that eventually caused this ulcer, and that's what caused the bleeding. It's just so coincidental that it all happened when we put her on this antibiotic, but I guess that's why all of this stuff all came together for the worst. It's like the perfect storm to cause this ulcer and bleed in her stomach. But the good thing was this doctor had been, and this is just another point I'm trying to make, she cared enough about our mental well-being and knew how important it was to us and how worried we were, that she walked out of the surgery to pick up her phone, to phone us personally, to tell us, we don't have to do the surgery, we don't have to go that far, we found it with the scopes, we're not going to be surgically cutting your daughter open, which she knew was our biggest worry. So she didn't make us wait until she had got out of the surgery an hour or more later. She told us straight away. She cared enough about our mental well-being as well to take the time to make that call to us, which meant the world to us. That meant we could sort of breathe and know that, hey, we were just going back to recovery, we just stop eating whatever we're eating, just get to recovery and go see my daughter, okay, and know that we've at least found this bleed now, we can start treating it and getting out of here and on the road to recovery. So that was on the Thursday afternoon. She finally came out of recovery. They spoke to us and explained this amalgamation of the perfect storm that caused this ulcer and how the bleeding has stopped now, how we're going to have to go on medication for the next 2 months, which will help that improve, how we can't give her ibuprofen, etc., and how we're going to treat this over the next couple of months and everything to get on to the road to recovery. But we're at least in the stage where we found what the issue is, so we could actually now start getting her better, which was relief in itself. They did explain because her hemoglobin levels had dropped as low as they had, they recommended an iron infusion, which we gave them the go-ahead for, so they gave her an iron infusion just to try and help boost her system so that she could start getting on to recovery. It did mean she would have to stay in that Thursday night as well, and they'll keep monitoring her, and only when we see that everything's on the road to recovery, then we could discharge her and actually bring her home. Unfortunately, on that Thursday evening, she started running a fever where it started spiking to 38.5 or whatever, right up to 39.6 or whatever it was, and was starting to get really dangerously high. They said you can get a fever post having an iron infusion. That's one possibility. The other possibility is she's been in the hospital for about a week, and there is a lot of sick kids, so maybe she's picked up a virus. She was already sick anyway with her ear infection and stuff like that. Maybe it could be an infection from the actual scopes that had gone in. So now we had to do a process of elimination, trying to work out, well, what is causing the fever to go up? Although we found the bleed and we've got the bleed under control, now we've got a fever to deal with, which was a pain in the butt. All we really wanted to do was get out of there now, get home and know that she's getting better. So that was on the Friday, and monitoring it all the time, unfortunately getting fever every few hours and trying to manage it as best we can with just paracetamol, because you can't give anything else because that'll compromise the bleed in the stomach and whatever else. So that was tough in itself, trying to get through the Friday and the Friday night. On the Saturday is when they eventually said to us, okay, she's still got the fevers, but all the tests we've done, because they did further blood tests, we can't pick up any of the other viruses, we can't pick up COVID, we can't pick up any other bacterial infections. So it potentially just because of the iron infusion that she's getting the fevers, well, we just got to keep monitoring her and hopefully it'll break. They wanted to keep her the Saturday night again until the Sunday and only discharge her on the Sunday. And that's a podcast for another day. What we've also been in the process of doing is my sister-in-law passed away last year, and we are in the process of adopting my nephew. And he's still in South Africa, and we're trying to get him adopted so we can legally be his guardian, so we can get him to come join us here in New Zealand. He's staying with another family. There's no other it's another family. It's friends that he's staying with at the moment that are looking after him, and they're a godsend. But there's no other family to adopt him in South Africa and look after him. So that's why we're trying to get him here. But it's been 18 months. It's been a slog with lawyers and back and forth and all kinds of stuff. And we finally got a virtual call on what is our Saturday night, which is their Saturday morning, with the magistrate and the lawyers and everything, to hopefully get this adoption over the line. So we really needed to be home to be able to do that as well. We did explain this to the doctors as well as the social workers, and they even sent somebody, it was a shrink, to talk to my wife because they were worried about her, but she unpacked and explained everything that we're going through. They were so helpful, and they went out of the way. They said, look, if you're still in the hospital on the Saturday night when you have to meet with the magistrate, we'll even get you a boardroom booked with internet connectivity, so you can make sure you can do that and still proceed with the adoption that you're trying to do, even if you're sitting in the hospital. It's just another way that they were so willing to go over and beyond to be able to help us. So it was unbelievable how they would help us. So we were pushing to try get home by Saturday night so that we could do that online meeting with the magistrate from home, but we did understand that we had to stay in the hospital. We at least had a plan B, and we could do that. Just talking about the support that we had over and above the hospital staff, the nurses, the social workers, the play therapists, the doctors, the psychiatrists, there were so many people that were willing to help from the hospital. Over and above that, we had my daughter's teacher that was unbelievable with a class. She got all my daughter's little friends to write little notes to her and drew little pictures for her. They bought her gifts and toys and stuff to play with in the hospital, and they got her chocolates and sweets and all kinds of stuff, and they put it in a box and they got it couriered over to the hospital, so she got to open it up at the hospital while she was there in her stay. That was earlier on in the week, so they were phenomenal with that. Some of her other little friends, moms and dads, put stuff together, put voice notes, video notes from their kids, sent it off to us, sent other packages, care packages to our house that I could take through to the hospital. They were unbelievable. We had friends that we've just made, it's actually people that my wife works with, that they were unbelievable. Not only the care packs and everything they put together, but they were willing to come and look after my son here. They were willing to drive to the hospital and help us. People went out of their way to support us. So the community has been phenomenal. And why I'm telling you this as well is I've always said that my wife and I, it was just tag team and it's us alone here. But I think this was a bit of an eye-opener, not only on how amazing public hospitals are. I don't think we got the service we were getting in a public hospital and the care that we were getting for my daughter in private hospitals back in South Africa. And I know maybe we had a bad experience with the private hospitals back in South Africa, but it just blew my mind that this is a public hospital and this is the service that we were getting and all the care that we were getting, which was phenomenal. I didn't even mention that there were therapy dogs that came through. So there's even people that come through, and she got to hug and play with little dogs and whatever. It was amazing. It was really amazing. And this is a public hospital. So that is like huge, why I'm so grateful to be in this country. But over and above that, the community, the teachers and the other friends and whatever that would reach out and be so willing to help us it's amazing. It's blown my mind how so many people genuinely care and want to help. And the support has been phenomenal, absolutely phenomenal. Anyway, get back to the story. So that was on the Saturday, because now we had to get back for this meeting with the magistrate and the lawyers and everything like that. They did allow us to just charge her, and we did get to bring her home on the Saturday night, and we got to have the call and whatever else. We were still having the fevers. But what they had arranged then is they said they'll arrange for a nurse to contact us on the Sunday, and if there were any issues, the nurse would even come through to our house. And if need be, we'd take her back to the hospital and whatever else. So I'm sitting on Sunday now. It's Sunday afternoon that I'm recording this. Yeah, we've had a bit of a rough night. She still had fevers, but we've noticed over today the fever seems to be under control, so she's actually heading in the right direction. So we're finally getting to actually breathe and move in the right direction. My wife is still off for the rest of this week, and we'll still be looking after my daughter. But why I wanted to share this is just for those people that are thinking about moving to New Zealand, or you're here in New Zealand and you sometimes got second guessing your decision to either move or that you've moved here. This has proved to me that we've made the right decision for our family. I know back in South Africa, I need to make sure we always had enough money to have private medical and whatever else. But here, this is the kind of healthcare system, and people complain about the healthcare system here, but I'm telling you, the experience we've had at Starship now in CBD, Auckland, has been phenomenal with my daughter. The doctors have been great. The nurses have been phenomenal. They've really been good. The support in the community has been phenomenal. Throughout an experience that has been an experience I don't want any parent to ever have to experience. And I'm sure other parents have even experienced worse than what we have. But having experienced it here, I'm grateful to be in this country and for the support that we've had. So it's just another big tick for me why New Zealand is a phenomenal country. And we're grateful for this opportunity to call this home and to be here. So I really wanted to share this with the whole purpose of Soft Landing is trying to help other immigrants make New Zealand home. Share my experience to show you that the community is there. They can help you. Sometimes you don't realize it, and don't be like me and have to go through this to realize that you've actually got a support structure and a community that'll help you. But it's also putting yourself out there and getting involved with them. But it's just to show you there is a community, there is a support structure, and the health system here does work. Big thing, if you're in Auckland, don't waste time. If you've got something wrong with your child, go straight through to Starship. Don't even waste your time. Just go straight there to the emergency. They've got everything you need. Even if you have to wait, be patient. Don't be like me and get antsy after a couple of hours and want to leave, because it could be the worst decision ever, because this actually proved that my daughter was worse than what we actually realized. So rather stay and get the okay from the doctors. But yeah, been a rough week, but it's also taught me a lot. Not only has it been the scariest time for me with my daughter, but it's also given me a lot of hope and a lot of just made me feel how grateful I am to be in this country, and grateful for the community that we have that supported us, and just also amazed at how well my wife has done. She's freaking super trooper, I swear. Yeah, she's been emotional. Yeah, she's been crying, but rightfully so. But it just proved she will do anything for her kids and goes out of her way, and we can pull together and get through anything. Okay? Please don't challenge us with anything more. We've had enough challenges for now, please. Side note, I didn't tell you about the adoption. I know it's another podcast for another day, but it got signed off, so the magistrate has granted us as legal guardians. So my nephew will be here hopefully in the next month or so. So another big thing off our shoulders, and I'll do a podcast about that another day. But it's been a rough week, but we've made it through it. We're still grinding on, and we'll keep going, and we'll never give up. But I just wanted to share with you guys. So if you've got queries about the healthcare system here, or you're having your challenges and hard time, also if it can just inspire you to never give up, just keep going, can get through it. You have got a community that'll help you. Just reach out. Don't say no to the help if somebody's offering you. Don't be too proud. Just say yes. We were always the people back home that would help everyone else, and we're always too proud to ask for help. But one thing we've done here is, you just have to sometimes just ask for that help, and let them just give it to you. You'll return it and pay it forward in weeks, months, years to come. Just do the same for others. With that, guys, I just wanted to, thank you for listening to my podcast. I hope this resonated with some of you and would help in some sort of way. And if it does, please share it with others. so that we can help as many immigrants as possible just settle in New Zealand. The whole idea is to make New Zealand home. Help us as immigrants to pull together, share our experiences, share what works, what doesn't, and help us make this home. So please share it with as many other immigrants as possible, and follow and like my page, please. Or not only just like, subscribe to my YouTube channel. It's at Soft Landing NZ. And let me know, if there's anything else you want me to share or anything else that would help you guys. Reach out to me, let me know, and I'll do a podcast on it or do videos on it or reach out to other people that can try and help. With that, guys, just stay safe, stay strong, and speak to you soon. Keep well. Ciao.